The Eastern Empire survives the fall of Rome. Although civilization in Western Europe declined after the fall of Rome, Eastern civilization flourished in the lands of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, its splendid capital, attracted many visitors who admired its immense wealth and unique culture. One such visitor was Rabbi Benjamin of Tudela, a Jew from northern Spain who traveled through the Middle East between the Second and Third Crusades. Around 1170, he reached Constantinople, of which he wrote, "Merchants come to it from every country by sea or land, and there is none like it in the world except Baghdad, the city of Islam. The Greek inhabitants are very rich in gold and precious stones, and they go clothed in garments of silk and gold embroidery. And they ride horses and look like princes. Wealth like that of Constantinople is not to be found in the whole world. Here also are men learned in all the books of the Greeks, and they eat and drink, every man under his vine and his fig tree." So that's what this Jewish person had to say about Constantinople. Continuation of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, lasted for more than 1,000 years. Over time, Byzantine influence spread beyond the empire's borders, especially north to the Slavs living beyond the Black Sea. Eastern Empire survives the fall of Rome. Strictly speaking, no such entity as a Byzantine Empire ever existed. The magnificent civilization that ruled the Eastern Mediterranean for more than 1,000 years was Rome. It was Roman in foundation, in law, and in heritage. They were Romans. The label Byzantine Empire, used by modern historians for this civilization, comes from an ancient trading center named Byzantium, an old Greek colony. So it's a name historians use. It's not what they would have used themselves. They would have called themselves Romans. When the Roman Emperor Constantine built an eastern capital at Byzantium, he chose of site where influence by its strategic location. He chose a site of great strategic influence. It was at the center of a north-south sea lane and east-west caravan route. In 330, the completed city was dedicated as Constantinople, the new Rome, a thriving metropolis from the beginning. The city was soon the envy of the world, not only for its prosperity, but also as a symbol for what an imperial city should be. While Germanic tribes carved up the west, a series of strong emperors held Byzantium steady, an eastern bulwark against the barbarians. Many accomplishments adorned Justinian's reign. The several capable emperors who ruled after Constantine had to battle continual pressure from invading nomad tribes, as well as Rome's old enemy, Persia. A peace treaty with the Persians in 387 protected the empire's eastern front, and for the next 100 years, Byzantium fought to maintain itself against the Visigoths, the Huns, the Ostrogoths, who beat against the northern frontiers. Justinian, who ruled from 527 to 565, was probably the Byzantine Empire's greatest ruler. Justinian was the Byzantine's greatest ruler. He was a general, a builder, statesman, and an impressive administrator. During his 37-year reign, Justinian attempted to restore a united Roman Empire, but succeeded only in recovering at, at immense cost some parts of the crumbling West from the Germanic tribes. Although he considered this recovery the main goal of his reign, Justinian's most important contribution to Western civilization was the organization of Roman law. into one systematic code, known as the Justinian Code. It remained the law of the land throughout the history of the Byzantine Empire. Roman law, which might otherwise have been forgotten, was thus preserved thanks to Justinian. Justinian lavished money on Constantinople, which he crowned by the building of a church called Hagia Sophia, a triumph of engineering and architectural design. The name means Church of Holy Wisdom. Sophia is wisdom, Greek. Throwing modesty to the winds during its dedication ceremony in 537, the emperor raised his hands and cried, "Glory to God, who has judged me worthy to perform this great work. O Solomon, I have surpassed you." Theodora, Justinian's wife, set the pattern for Byzantine empresses. She held her own court, received ambassadors, rewarded office seekers, and advised the emperor. Many Byzantine empresses were similarly active in affairs of state. At his death, Justinian left a realm dangerously weakened by the combination of foreign wars, costly building projects. Not only was the treasury empty, but the western borderlands were overextended and hard to defend. Moreover, in battling to reclaim them, Justinian had neglected his eastern provinces. Slavs, Bulgars, Persians, and others were quick to note this neglect and promptly moved their troops against the emperor's frontiers. Orthodox Byzantium mixed Greek, Persian, and Roman culture. After Justinian's death, the Western Empire was sliced away by more dramatic conquests. The idea of a unified Roman Empire was not forgotten, but it was never again achieved. Moreover, by the 8th century, the Eastern Empire had developed a culture that was definitely more Greek and Middle Eastern than Roman and European. You can see the picture I put up here. On the left is the European Pope of the European religion, and on the right is a picture of the Orthodox Archbishop. Look how different they are. It's because of these cultural influences. The Byzantine population was largely Greek, although Slavs, Jews, Syrians, and other peoples were also citizens of the empire. Everyone spoke Greek in the streets and until the 700s, Latin in government offices. For the most part, the Byzantines were Christians who called themselves Romans, but built their culture on the Greek plan. Eventually, however, customs of Persia mingled with those of Greece to replace Roman influence on Byzantium. The elaborate court etiquette and lavish state ceremonies associated with the demigod status of the Persian monarch were adopted by the Byzantine emperor. Rome was still shaped by the law courts and the political power of the ruler, but the outward trappings were Eastern. For example, before anyone approached the emperor, he or she would touch forehead to the floor 3 times. Slowly, the Orthodox Church in Constantinople became distinct from the Catholic Church in Rome. You can see that in the picture here. Very different. In the West, the rising power of the church was strengthened by the loss of centralized government when Rome fell, because bishops assumed certain civil powers. When the government went away, the church remained. But in the East, the relationship between church and state was quite different. The Byzantine emperor ruled over both church and state. He appointed the patriarch, the head of the Orthodox Church, but let the patriarch run the church affairs, just as he left the details of civil government to his ministers. This arrangement was usually successful. As early as 381 AD, Constantinople rejected the Pope as the highest religious authority on earth. Later, arguments over dogma, which is belief, and ritual, which are ceremony, added to the bitterness of the quarrel. A complete break came in 1054 AD. when the Pope and a patriarch excommunicated each other, creating a permanent schism or division in Christianity. Various ecumenical or world councils have discussed reuniting these two parts of Christianity. So far, none has been successful. Powerful emperors periodically restored the empire. Between 330 and 1453, periods of imperial strength and prosperity altered with periods of instability and economic decline. For 10 centuries, Constantinople fought off numerous attempts to destroy it, but the 150 years after Justinian's death were particularly difficult. As you can see in this picture, what the Byzantine Empire went through after Justinian. The first picture is Justinian's reign, and you can see so on. In the 7th century, Emperor Heraclius once more battled the Persians and took back Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. However, a new power, the Muslim Arabs, soon replaced the Persians as the perennial enemy, and Heraclius' gains were again lost. By the end of the 7th century, the Arabs had swept across North Africa and conquered most of the eastern Mediterranean. During their eyes toward Turning their eyes toward the richest prize of all, they unsuccessfully attacked Constantinople in the winter of 718 AD. They were forced to retreat because of Byzantine's weapons, Greek fire, which is a liquid made from a secret formula that sets fire to enemy ships. From the 8th to the 11th centuries, two emperors stood out as powerful, effective rulers. Leo III from 717 to 741 routed the Arabs from Constantinople and strengthened the defenses of Asia Minor. He expanded the empire's armies by granting land to farmers in exchange for military service. So he improved the defenses, and he improved the army, and he got the Arabs out of Byzantine land. Basil II ruled from 976 to 1025, followed several able emperors who worked to rebuild the power and prosperity of the empire after another long period of decline. For his ruthless conquest of the Bulgars, Basil was called the Bulgar Slayer. In the 7th century, the Bulgars, a nomadic people from Central Asia, attacked the northern Balkans. They enslaved the populace and settled into what is now Bulgaria, establishing a powerful state on the Byzantine emperor's doorstep. Over the centuries, relations between the two peoples were far from cordial. Finally, after winning a fiercely fought battle, Basil had 15,000 Bulgar soldiers blinded, leaving only a handful with a single eye, each to guide the rest home. The Bulgarian king is said to have died of shock when this sightless multitude returned. Once the enemies surrendered, however, Basil made the Bulgars a client state of the empire, freeing future emperors from that particular menace. The destruction of the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine fortunes fell again after Basil's death. The city-state of Venice and other emerging merchant powers offered serious competition to Byzantine trade in the eastern Mediterranean. Further, Seljuk Turks, a foe more powerful than any Byzantines had yet faced, appeared from Central Asia to threaten Constantinople. In 1071, the empire lost the whole of Asia Minor to the Turks after a humiliating defeat. The loss of Asia Minor was a serious blow. Not only had it served to buffer against surprise attacks by Eastern invaders, it also supplied the empire with food and recruits for the army. If the loss of Asia Minor was unfortunate, however, the sack of Constantinople was catastrophic. In 1204, the soldiers of the Fourth Crusade descended on Constantinople as their target, supposedly to await transport to Jerusalem. But instead, at the instigation of an envious Venice, the army swarmed through Constantinople, burning, killing, and looting the treasure house of the empire. Some of the treasure was irrevocably lost. Some of it was shipped west. Today, 4 bronze horses from Constantine's hippodrome can be found in St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice, where Venetian lords sent them in 1204. These are shown in photographs today. After 3 days of rioting, a Roman Catholic king sat on the throne of Byzantium. The Pope was appalled when he heard the reports, but took advantage of events to appoint Roman Catholic bishops to the Orthodox churches. 57 years later, in 1261, the Byzantines threw the Crusaders out. The Byzantine Empire never recovered from the sack of Constantinople. Even after the Crusaders were ejected, the empire knew little peace. Civil war broke out as various princes fought for the throne, and religious quarrels divided people. In 1354, the Ottoman Turks, former subjects of the Seljuk Turks, bypassed Constantinople, crossing the Bosporus further south. They quickly spread out into the countryside, beginning a state that would become the Ottoman Empire. By 1445, all that remained of the once mighty Byzantine Empire was the city of Constantinople. Just a city was left. The end of the Byzantine Empire finally came in 1453, when barely 8,000 defenders were left to face the besieging Turkish army of 160,000 troops. After 8 heroic weeks, the city fell. As the Turks stormed the walls, the emperor rushed to meet them, crying out as he was cut down, "God forbid that I should live an emperor without an empire. As my city falls, I will fall with it." So, what do you think? What were 2 things Justinian did? How did Byzantine civilization mix? Why were Leo and Basil considered powerful? And what major invasion led to the final collapse in 1453?